AIPAC has announced they're going to spend $100 million. And that's not including the DMFI PAC and their affiliated PACs in trying to oust maybe 10 Democratic representatives in primaries. This is all to basically say, like, to send a message to everybody else. This is a disciplinary action. Pramila Jayapal, it was reported today, I think, was in with Hakeem Jefferies saying, you got to do something here. And by do something, that can be stuff like, and certainly the Democrats in the House have done this before. If you work with any type of challengers, we're going to put you on the blacklist like we did before. And this is a crucial period of time in terms of like Democrats taking the House, because there's a good chance they lose the Senate. Like we say, it's a tenuous situation with the presidency. It's sort of a weird type of like dynamic where they could actually win back the House. And they could win back the House, it seems to me, by like 10 seats even. Yeah. And so what's your sense of what Hakeem Jeffries is going to do? Because this is a very hard thing to read. He doesn't have, he needs, he probably wants the majority in a way that, maybe Pelosi could have been like, hey, 2 years in, 2 years out. I mean, who knows? Obviously, she wants the majority, but he doesn't necessarily have the power to push back on, his number one funder is I think AIPAC. If I'm not mistaken. What happens here?
I don't know. I didn't know that about Jeffries, that his number one funder was AIPAC. That
pretty high. Let me get this specific.
It complicates things substantially. Look, this is now, we're in a really kind of a binary choice in terms of American politics. Taking the Israel and Gaza situation out of it, which is intensely difficult and complex, politically speaking, in America. It's not morally complex, I don't think. I mean, to me, dead kids are dead kids. I don't care whose dead kids they are, they're still dead kids. And I just see that's very clearly, for me, it is morally very easy for me to look at that situation and see right from wrong. Ceasefire is obviously required. There's just no doubt about it. Now, when you look at it, the political analysis is much more complicated in the United States. The polling shows, all kinds of things. The Democrats and Republicans are kind of split in a weird way. It's very difficult. Having said that, if you look at if AIPAC is going to be going specifically after Democratic politicians and saying, we're going to do this if you don't toe the line, they are making a choice that they are now basically a Republican lobbying operation. And they are now affiliated with the party that is explicitly aligned itself with fascism, and even more specifically with Nazism. Now, Donald Trump was out there talking about vermin, and maybe he thought he was talking about hippies or something, but I would think that AIPAC would understand what the resonance of that and understand who they are aligning themselves with. The Democrats have to understand this, and they've got to recognize what's happening there and realize that this is not, when it comes to American politics, there is no, there's no such thing as aligning with fascism and being our friend. That just can't be. That simply can't be. So my view is pretty clear on this. I don't know if the Democrats are probably not seeing it that way. They've got a lot of people in the Congress and around the country who are very traumatized by what happened on October 7th and are traumatized by the anti-Semitism they're seeing around. That's a different concern. AIPAC is something very specific, and they are backing, essentially by doing this, by saying that they're going to do this and trying to manipulate this situation, are saying that we're going to back Donald Trump and his fascist MAGA movement. And that's basically what they're saying. So,
well, first off, AIPAC doesn't care. They don't care about that. they donated to 106 Republicans who voted, to decertify the election. The dynamic has existed in terms of Netanyahu going and looking for support from right-wing fascist political parties in Europe. He's been doing that for over a decade. You can look at it like, why is John Hagee speaking at an supposed anti-Semitism rally? I mean, this guy thinks that Hitler was bequeathed us by God to bring about the return of the Messiah by getting all the Jews to go to Israel. I mean, that's not, he's no friend of Israel, of Jews in that instance, maybe a friend of Israel. But Hakeem Jefferies, top 5 PAC contributors, 2022. And maybe you could pop this up. I mean, this is what's really disturbing in terms of this dynamic, because they knocked off a couple of progressive of Democrats in the last round. Top one is, scroll down. Top one is Pro-Israel America PAC. That's AIPAC. That's his top contributor. The next one is Vote Sane. I think that is just a general PAC. But NORPAC is, in fact, a promoting the U.S.-Israel relationship, nonpartisan group. And then American Israel Public Affairs Committee is his 4th biggest contributor. And Paul Weiss et al. I'm not sure who that is.
That's the law firm that Jeffries used to work at prior to being in Congress.
So, and I don't know if they're one of the people who have rescinded offers in the news as of late. But I mean, you can get you get the gist here. This guy's own personal political fortune is very tied up, in money from AIPAC and affiliated organizations. I mean, it's really, there's been times in the past where he's sort of paid some lip service to when they went off of Ilhan Omar. The only upshot about this, the only one upshot, is that with AIPAC coming in this hard, if the squad members and squad adjacent can withstand these primary challenges, what it does is it completely undercuts the power of AIPAC, because their whole thing is, watch what we did to them. We could do this to you.
We can do it to you, right?
It's the Fonzie effect. He had to punch one guy once, and then everybody thinks that he's, the tough guy, just to drop a reference that is probably older than 90% of the audience here. But
Fonzie?
Yes, sadly. But I don't know. You know what I'm talking about, Digby.
I know. Yeah. I mean, I'm old enough.
But if they can overcome this, then all of a sudden it sort of destroys the proof of concept, as it were. And so this could be a seminal fight. I mean, it's, it happened with the Democrats in the NRA too.
In fact, that's a really good point. That's a really good point, because that's what happened. Was that the NRA wielded tremendous power over numbers of Democrats. And when they actually stood their ground and said, recognized that they had to take a stand, it worked. And the NRA no longer has that influence in the Democratic Party. It hasn't yet made the difference that it needs to, but it not for lack of trying from the Republicans, from the Democrats, I mean. The Democrats are actually pretty united now on that issue. And this same thing could happen. And it's not, this isn't really this isn't about, deciding that the U.S. can't ever support Israel. That's really that's beyond the scope of this particular thing. This is about a very powerful lobby wielding outsized power in the Democratic Party while it's allying itself with the other party. Which is the same thing the NRA did. Very, very powerful thing to do, and it is truly toxic to democratic politics. And I think you're right. And I think these progressives who are, being targeted this way I think they have a good chance of surviving.
I think for the most
dynamic right now, I think the dynamic in the party right now is, I mean, this isn't really about money in the sense that AIPAC can throw a lot of money at these folks, but this issue is bigger than that, and it is more personal, I think, to people.
One more, just like word on this. So Greg Kazar, who is undoubtedly one of the people who are going to be targeted, as soon as this was announced, he came out and his office released a paper that basically said, bring it on. 80% of my constituents, disagree with you on this. Mm-hmm. But what AIPAC has done in the past, and what the MFI has done in the past, is they don't necessarily go all in or even at all with making it about Israel when they attack these progressives.
They might not even
come in
Israel.
On something else, whatever they perceive as to be the vulnerability. The Israel stuff, they don't even necessarily deploy that because they don't want it to be about that. But this type of stuff, it's horrible. And frankly, also, there's never, obviously, I say as a Jew, any justification for anti-Semitism. But there are things that I think when there are accelerants that can exist, and this type of stuff, going in and dumping this kind of money for an agenda that would be at the very least inexplicit, let's put it that way, not helpful. Not helpful. And you've got, to me, AIPAC, and, we've talked about AIPAC for, they've been outsized influence. I mean, they took out, what was her name? Cynthia McKinney. Remember her? No, you're thinking of, it's not McKinney. They took out Donna Edwards.
Right. Donna Edwards.
And
a very mainstream Democrat, by the way.
And Levin, I think in Michigan. They took Andy Levin, rather.
Andy Levin, yeah. I mean, this is they've been they've had this kind of outsized power for a long time, but we're at a point now where the choice is so stark, and people have to, this has to be made explicit within the Democratic Party. This has to come from within the party itself. They've got to, what AIPAC is doing is they are basically, and you can just put in the current context, they're backing, Bibi Netanyahu. It's not Israel, it's Bibi Netanyahu and his agenda and what he is doing, which means that they are also, betraying the many Israelis who at this point and before wanted to get rid of Netanyahu. So there's plenty of people who are not, going along with the AIPAC agenda in this way. And the same thing in the United States. They are aligning themselves with Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Now, Democrats who, have got to understand that that's not okay. That is just not okay. And if they do this kind of stuff, if they continue to do this kind of stuff, they're going to break apart the unity that the Democrats have surprisingly had over the past few years in recognizing the threat that's coming from the right. And that means we're sunk, because that's the only thing we have. So, here we are.